Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Reflecting, debriefing, and taking part in operational learning is a vehicle to identify new or emerging risks, monitoring trends, recommending remedial actions, and promoting the best practice, as well as achieving continuous improvement in service delivery and the safety of firefighters and frontline operators worldwide. The King's Cross fire on the 18th of November 1987 was considered the worst fire in the history of the London Underground. King's Cross fire claimed the lives of 31 people, including a senior ranked firefighter, and seriously injured many more at the King's Cross station. More than 150 firefighters and 30 fire engines were called to the blaze, although small to begin with, described by one firefighter as about the size of a large cardboard box. It became more serious very quickly. The flames heated the framework and the decking of Piccadilly line escalator, preheating the rest of the wooden staircase before bursting into flames. Today we're going to cover some of the background around London's regional transport system, the King's Cross station fire itself, the timeline of the events of that night, the response from the London Underground, the response from the firefighters in attendance, some recommendations, learning outcomes, and an acknowledgement of the brave individuals who attended that fire and those that lost their life on the 18th of November 1987. Today's podcast was in partnership with our good friends Johnny and the team over at William Wood Watches. Now, if you're not familiar by now, William Wood was the name of his grandfather. He was a firefighter in the British Fire Service for over 25 years, stationed in Newcastle on the Blue Watch. Now, his grandson Johnny is a great friend of the podcast and came up with William Wood Watches to honour his grandfather and the legacy of firefighters all around the world. Now, some pretty cool updates from the William Wood Watch team. When it comes to their chivalrous collection, this August they came out with, honestly, one of my favourite looks for it. They came out with the gun metal for the face of the watch. Now, if you go over there and look at their watches, they've of course got the Jubilee, the Triumph, the Valium, the Bronze, but if you look at the chivalrous range, this is effectively the luxury dress range. It's got that sleek case, the luxury finish, and you can wear it on absolutely any occasion. I myself, I've said on the podcast before, I'm a massive fan personally of the Valiant collection. I've got the red watch, always with the red strap. Now, they do come with a selection of straps as well. And honestly, for me, the straps is probably one of the most favourite parts of it. It really is the one that catches everybody's eye. It's what draws you into it. And when you receive your William Wood watch, that whole unboxing experience is actually kind of special. Whether or not you get the fire alarm box or the VIP roll, usually comes, I think, with 3 different straps. However, I think it is if you get the Triumph collection, which is the Swiss precision watch made in Switzerland, you actually get that really unique fire alarm box as well that comes with it. Now that thing is absolutely stunning. You know the types you see in buildings where it says break glass on the front of it? That honestly has been made into this luxury leather bound box. You open that bad boy up, you see all the straps, you see the bottom compartment where you get the encasing watch. Pretty sure it comes with the cufflinks as well. And again, if you go over to their website, williamwoodwatches.com, you'll see that this company really does support firefighters all over the world. I think to date they are over £75,000 they've contributed to firefighter charities all over the world. So head on over and check it out. Have a look at the chivalrous first. They've got a chocolate range on there, but for me, the gunmetal one, if you're going to have a look at the gunmetal, that looks absolutely fantastic. The Triumph is probably my favourite, and I'm saving up for that one at the minute, but I have got the Valiant collection myself, and I absolutely love it. Johnny and the team are really making some moves with William Wood Watches, doing some great things for our sector. Now back to the show. Now, this wasn't the first fire that had been experienced by the London Underground. It's clear from the evidence that people continued to smoke in the Underground in spite of the ban in February 1985, following the fire at Oxford Circus Station. They did so in particular by lighting up on escalators as they prepared to leave the station. In the investigation to the King's Cross fire, the court was provided with detailed information of 46 escalator fires between 1956 and 1988, and in 32 instances, the cause was attributed to smokers' materials. About 2 weeks before the disaster itself, gaps were observed between the treads and the skirting board of Piccadilly line escalator 4 at King's Cross. They were caused by crabbing movement of the escalator. Thus, there were gaps through which a lighted match could pass. Moreover, 30% of the fire cleats were missing, making it easier for a match to fall through the gap and for a fire to flourish. Beneath each side of the treads lay the running tracks of the escalators themselves. Those running tracks should have been cleaned and lubricated properly. They were not. When the forensic scientists inspected the scene after the disaster, they recovered several matches in the running track underneath the lower part of the escalator. A detailed investigation into the fire dynamics was carried out by the scientific committee. Eyewitness accounts and scientific investigation found in summary that the fire began at 1925, probably in the vicinity of step 48. Since the escalator was running, the fire was carried up the escalator and other sites near the top involved in the left-hand side of the escalator by flame spread beneath the treads. The fire beneath the escalator produced significant preheating of the balustrades and decking, which made them more susceptible to ignition and spread of fire. The sudden change in conditions between 1943 and 1945, when a modest escalator fire was transformed into a flashover, which erupted into the tube line's ticket hall. The alarm was raised by a passenger at about 1930. Following the procedure in the rulebook, one of the staff went to inspect it, but he was not based at King's Cross, and he had received no training. He informed neither the station manager nor the line controller. London Underground had no evacuation plan. By chance, 2 police officers were present, and as the radios did not work below ground, one ran to the surface to call the London Fire Brigade. It was 1934. Thereafter, the police decided to evacuate passengers from the lower levels of the station by way of Victoria Line escalator and through the tube line ticket hall. They did not know the geography of the station and believed they had chosen the quickest and only way for passengers to reach the surface safely. They could not have anticipated the flashover or the immense amount of dense black smoke that then consumed almost the entire London King's Cross. To give greater context to the timeline, we are just going to go through some of the King's Cross station specific. Now, King's Cross is one of the country's great travel gateways. The Underground Railway first came to King's Cross in 1863, when the Metropolitan Railway line was opened between Farringdon and Paddington, linking the terminals of the Great Northern at King's Cross, the London North Western at Euston, and the Great Western at Paddington. The Great Northern Piccadilly and Brompton Railway running between Finsbury Park and Hammersmith, which now forms part of the Piccadilly line, reached King's Cross in 1906. The following year, a separate station was opened to accommodate the second tube railway, the City and South London Railway, which now forms the City branch of the Northern Line for anybody that's familiar with that area. The Victoria Line itself was then linked to King's Cross in around 1968. King's Cross Underground, if you haven't been there, is a labyrinth of passages, shafts and tunnels where 5 lines meet: the Metropolitan and Circle, Piccadilly, Northern and Victoria. The Underground station is unique in being built at 5 different levels below ground and is connected by passageways, staircases and escalators. Of the 5 lines serving the station, the Metropolitan line and Circle lines, using the same tracks, were built in the main on the cut and cover principle. They're relatively close to the surface, and the trains are driven in a conventional manner and are equipped with radio and a public address system, although there is no guard on them these days. The other 3 lines are deep bored tubes down at the level of sewers and cable ducts and stuff like that. In 1987, King's Cross was the busiest station on the Underground network. On average, weekday, over 250,000 passengers used the station and 100,000 or so passing through it in each peak period between 0730 and 10 and 1600 and 1830. As referenced earlier, there's going to be issues that we talk about the escalators in this incident. Now, on the 24th of December 1944, there was a particularly severe fire in the Bakerloo line escalators at Paddington, which were completely gutted. A review of the escalator fires at about this time stated that there had been 77 fires on escalators in the period of 1939 to 1944, and that the types of escalator in use were particularly prone to fires, and these fires were mainly attributed to the ignition by smokers' materials of accumulated dirt under the escalators. Now, having been aware of these issues, there was obviously several attempts to put in equipment. Now, the automatic operation of water fog equipment was envisaged as early as 1948. Essentially, the problem was to find a detection system for smoke or heat which would cover the entire escalator system and be sufficiently sensitive to detect a fire early enough for the water fog to be able to extinguish it. Now, an initial trial of smoke detection equipment on that escalator at Tottenham Court Road in 1954 was followed by a second stage in 1964 when equipment was installed on 2 escalators at Baker Street and a further 2 at Paddington. Now, these did not automatically operate the fog equipment, but did incorporate an alarm system. Over the next 10 years, there were numerous proposals to install smoke detection equipment on other escalators, including the Northern Line and Piccadilly Line escalators at King's Cross. However, no action was taken because, on one occasion, the proposal was inevitably left out of the budget. Subsequently, the proposal was rejected on the grounds that the escalators it was proposed to put them on didn't have enough life left in them to justify the expenditure. It was also said that the detection gave more false alarms than real ones, and in fact, some of the escalators were expected to remain in service into the next century. What follows is a timeline and series of events. The evening rush hour passed uneventfully at King's Cross Underground Station on Wednesday 18th of November 1987, with the usual 100,000 or so passengers passing through between 1600 and 1830. The precise timings during the fire and the exact order of events cannot always be established with absolute certainty, but from checking a series of documents, this is the timeline that we have come up with. Where possible, we have verified these timings, and these have been published in several investigations and articles. At 1929, a passenger, Mr. Squire, travelling up escalator 4, noticed a small fire underneath a step on the right-hand side of the upper part of the escalator. He reported it at the tickets office, where two individuals telephoned Relief Station Inspector Hayes. In 1930, another passenger, seeing smoke 2/3 of the way up the escalator and a glow underneath, pressed the emergency stop diamond at the top of the escalator and shouted down to the people to get off the escalator. The leading railman, the ticket collector on the way out barrier, and Police Constable Peppington and Police Constable Kirby, who were in the temporary station operations room in the tube line ticket hall observing the scene, each went to investigate. Relief Station Inspector Hayes with Railwayman Farrell went to investigate the report of the fire as required by the London Underground rulebook. He had been told it was on the Northern Line escalator. PC Peppington descended escalator and saw smoke in a single flame about 3 to 4 inches high, 1/3 of the way down the escalator. In 1932, he decided to call his headquarters information room on his personal radio to summon the London Fire Brigade, but had to go out to the surface to make a call as the radios did not work below ground. He waited at the top of the stairs on the Euston Road, where he was joined by PC Dixon, whom he told to await the fire brigade. Meanwhile, PC Peppington returned to the underground, and another police constable stopped the escalators. In 1932, further alarm was raised by another passenger. In 1933, Police Constable Peppington calls was received at British Transport Police Headquarters. PC Hanson and PC Balfe, alerted by PC Peppington's radio call, went from the British Rail Main Line concourse to the Tube Line's ticket hall, where they were joined by PC Kirby. In 1933, British Transport Police Headquarters passed the emergency message as a 999 call via the British Telecom Emergency Call Centre to London Fire Brigade. In 1935, Relief Station Inspector Hayes arrived at the Piccadilly Line escalator concourse and went into the lower machine room, where he saw and smelt nothing. In 1936, leading railman Brickell, who had descended escalator, saw smoke 2/3 of the way up the escalator. He and railman Farrell were told by the police to send passengers to the Victoria Line escalator. In 1936, London Fire Brigade dispatched 4 pumping appliances and a turntable ladder from Soho, Clerkenwell and Manchester Square fire stations in the accordance with the predetermined attendance plan. Forward control unit and an aerial control unit were also dispatched. In 1937, on hearing the emergency call, 2 more police constables went to the scene and noticed light smoke at the station entrance. While talking to the British Transport Police, the Piccadilly Line controller was informed of the incident. In 1938, London Fire Brigade controllers told London Underground headquarters of the report of the fire at King's Cross. Relief Station Inspector Hayes and Railman Farrell went to the Piccadilly Line escalators to the Tube Line's ticket hall. Relief Station Inspector Hayes unlocked and entered the upper machine room. He went down the stairs and then down the steps under the escalator, where he saw smoke and flames beneath the escalator. He returned to the machine room to collect a carbon monoxide extinguisher, but he was unable to get near enough to the fire to use it. Relief Station Inspector Hayes did not attempt to use the water fog equipment. He was preoccupied and forgot about it. In 1939, the police officers in the ticket hall took the decision to evacuate the area. In 1940, Mr. Hanson telephoned Piccadilly Line Acting Traffic Manager Weston, who telephoned Metropolitan Line Station Inspector. Railman Farrell assisted the police in cordoning off the top of the escalator and directing passengers entering the ticket hall towards Victoria Line. In 1941, at the request of the police, Railman Farrell went down the Victoria Line platforms and telephoned the line controller to ask the trains to be ordered not to stop at King's Cross. In 1942, PC Hanson ordered the booking office staffing to evacuate. In the confusion, no one alerted those in the Bureau de Change on the nearby platforms. In 1942, Alpha 24 Soho Pump, with Station Officer Townsley, arrived. In 1943, immediately afterwards, Charlie 27 Clerkenwell Pump Ladder, with temporary Sub-Officer Bell, arrived together with Alpha 22 Manchester Square Pump, with Station Officer Osborne, followed by Alpha 24 Soho Pump, with leading fireman Kendall, and Turntable Officer Treffry, 1 minute later in 1944. Relief Station Officer Hayes and Station Inspector entered the upper machine room and operated the circuit breakers. Police constables saw people still coming into the Victoria Line escalators and again telephoned from the temporary station operator's room to confirm the trains had been ordered not to stop. An ambulance was then requested. 2 police constables went down the Victoria Line escalators and helped other police constables to direct passengers to the Victoria Line platforms and concourse area up the Victoria Line escalator. Hey folks, just wanted to jump in with a quick piece around firefighter health and well-being. Now, we get a lot of messages and emails into the podcast around firefighter health and fitness, whether you are trying to join the fire service and pass them tricky fitness tests, if you are currently serving, or if you are coming up to that next chapter of your life, retiring from the emergency services. We get so many different questions around it. So in partnership with Fitness for the Frontline, we have come up with a series of guidance and programs specifically designed to reflect the physical elements of the role of a firefighter. So whether it's carrying an LPP across an overgrown field, lifting a ladder above your head under running it, or wrestling with cutting gear for 30 plus minutes at some kind of complicated RTC, our bodies are required to lift, push, and carry objects in very specific circumstances. That is effectively what Fitness on the Frontline focuses on, as well as the longer term aspects of overall health and wellness for our firefighters. firefighters. There are focuses around strength endurance, and overall conditioning, all achievable and relevant to our roles. Now, we are definitely not about to be smashing out world records or getting that beach body ready in 6 weeks rubbish. The systems and programs that we put in place are adjusted for people's current fitness levels, and they're not a prescriptive weight or a one-size-fits-all BS. We also take into consideration all the fitness testing for initial application and also for current firefighters who want to maintain and progress their fitness levels. It is very likely for myself personally that I'm still going to be a firefighter when I'm 60 plus, so longevity in the role is really important to me, and I know it is for so many people out there. The system has a built-in ability to adjust easily depending on the equipment you have available, your fatigue levels, or if you're coming off busy-ass night shifts and you haven't got a lot of time to work out. You can record your results, log your weights, your body measurements. We've got all the facilities to do that. The system is yours to use how you want to train. We've taken all the fluff and the gimmicks and the BS away from most of the rubbish that you see out there, and this is designed by experienced operational firefighters and qualified people, including myself, with members of the team available to contact throughout the time you are within us in the program. If you ever get stuck, if you're starting to struggle, and also to celebrate those wins and achievements with you. It all starts with no obligation, 7 days worth of the programming, absolutely free. So whether you're joining, serving, or looking at the next chapter in your life, have a glance in the link for the podcast. Fitness for the Frontline is designed by firefighters for firefighters. Now back to the show. Station Officer Townsley, followed by temporary Sub-Officer Bell, went to the access the situation on the escalators. They saw a fire, which temporary Sub-Officer Bell described at about the size of a large cardboard box, but with flames licking up the handrail on the left-hand side seen from below. Station Officer Townsley called upon Station Officer Osborne to send firemen wearing breathing apparatus sets and a jet. Station Officer Townsley and Sub-Officer Bell went further down to get a better view. As passengers were still coming out of the escalator, temporary Sub-Officer Bell went down in order to stop others coming in, while Station Officer Townsley returned to the ticket hall. A westbound Piccadilly line train stopped, the last to let passengers out of this platform. In 1944, in the ticket hall, Station Officer Townsley ordered temporary leading fireman Flanagan to send a message, "Make pumps 4, persons reported," thereby confirming the seriousness of the fire and the need for ambulances. Temporary leading fireman Flanagan went out to do so. Within a very short time, the whole ticket hall became engulfed in an intense heat and thick back smoke. There was darkness and screaming. Temporary leading fireman Flanagan ordered his crew to lead the public out and run for their lives. The flashover had taken place. The time was shown to be a digital clock at the head of the Piccadilly line escalators, which was stopped by the heat of the flashover at 1945. At 1945, as two London Underground staff were about to leave the machine room, they heard a whoosh as they both heard the cracking sound of fire. Smoke made it impossible for them to make their way out under the Piccadilly line escalators, so they left via the alternative staircase under the Victoria line escalators and emerged on the Victoria line escalator concourse. Some way down on the Victoria line escalator, P.C. Hansen was shouting to the passengers to hurry up as quickly as possible. He went a short way towards the Piccadilly line escalators and saw a jet of flames shoot up from the escalator shaft, hit the ceiling of the ticket hall, and travel along the ceiling towards him. P.C. Hansen was caught off balance, crawled back to the Victoria line escalators and shouted to the passengers to keep low and get out through the ticket hall by the nearest exit. The heat increased. Flames licked the roof of the ticket hall and swirled towards P.C. Hansen as he made his escape through the Tube Line's ticket hall at the Euston Road South exit, suffering serious injuries as he did so. Seeing what happened, Station Officer Osborne called out to the passengers to return to the bottom. He did so himself, assisting Mr. Bates, a passenger who had received terrible injuries in the ticket hall a few metres off the top of the escalator of the Victoria line. Mr. Bates' injuries were so bad that Station Officer Osborne sought to help him by dousing him with water from the fire extinguisher. P.C. Dixon, who was near the exit of the south side of Euston Station, helped P.C. Hansen out into the street. He then sent a major incident emergency message by radio to the British Transport Police headquarters. In 1946, automatic equipment technician Dyer waved down northbound Victoria train line 227, driven by Mr. Barrett. He had received an order not to stop, and so had been driving through on manual control at the walking pace and stopped. Between 150 and 200 passengers were evacuated by this train. The procedure was repeated with two further Victoria lines until all passengers were finally clear of the tube line platforms by 1955. In 1947, London Ambulance Service received initial requests for attendance at King's Cross and dispatched an ambulance from St John's Wood at 1949. In 1949, Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw of the London Fire Brigade arrived on scene. 1950, Station Inspector went to the Northern Line platform, where he was told what trains were still stopping. In 1953, London Fire Brigade Controller informed London Underground HQ Controller that the full fire at King's Cross Station. In 1959, the first ambulance arrived at King's Cross Station. At 2000 hours, attempts by the police to force the British rail gates and attract the attention by shouting and the use of personal radio failed. At 2003, Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw ordered, "Make pumps 12 and make ambulances 4." At 20:05, Police Sergeant O'Neill and 8 London Underground staff who had been trapped on the Metropolitan Line platform by smoke were evacuated by train. At 20:06, Inspector Wilkinson erroneously told British Transport Police Division Information Room that the fire had been extinguished. And at 20:08, London Ambulance Service put hospitals on standby alert. At 20:12, London Fire Brigade Divisional Officer Johnson arrived and took over command. 6 ambulances were on scene at this time. At 2013, Inspector Wilkinson told British Transport Police Divisional Information Room that the fire was blazing fiercely. At 2015, London Fire Brigade Deputy Assistant Chief Officer Wilson arrived and took over command. At 2016, London Ambulance Service major incident was declared and hospitals were alerted. At 2041, London Fire Brigade Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy arrived and took over command. At 2053, London Fire Brigade Station Officer Dimont brought the station plans from London Fire Brigade's plan box in the station to the Area Control Unit. At 2100, Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw, with breathing apparatus crew, made his way through the Tube Line's ticket hall and down the Victoria Line escalators and met up with Station Officer Osborne and Temporary Sub-Officer Bell. At 2111, Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy gave the order, make pumps 30. At 2115, Station Officer Dumont, with breathing apparatus crew, was dispatched to enter the Midland City subway. At the end of the subway, they met Temporary Sub-Officer Bell, who had been presumed missing. At the bottom of the escalators, they met other crews who had entered via the Tube Line ticket hall. At 2129, London Fire Brigade Liaison Officer, Divisional Officer Nesbitt, arrived at London Underground Headquarters Control Room. At 2132, 14 ambulances were now on scene. At 2140, leading railwoman Ord and railman Sorby were discovered in the staff mess room of the subway leading to St Pancras Station. They were then rescued by firefighters. At 2148, Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy sent message, fire surround. At 2154, Inspector Wilkinson told British Transport Police, fires are being dampened down and are now out. At 0146, London Fire Brigade sent the stop message, indicating that the fire had been contained. Search and salvage operations continued throughout the night. The fire at King's Cross Station presented the London Fire Brigade with 4 problems. Number 1, they were not called immediately. Number 2, the crews attending had not detailed knowledge of the geography of the station layout. Number 3, the flashover occurred within 2 minutes of their first arrival in the Tube Line ticket hall. And number 4, the officer in charge of the first appliance was killed, and the officer in charge of 2 of the other appliances were cut off below ground. Therefore, communications broke down. In 1963, the London Government Act was passed, passing the way for the establishment of London Fire Brigade as it is today. Between 1965 and 1986, the Greater London Council was the controlling authority, but the Local Government Act in 1985 replaced the Greater London Council with a new body, the London Fire and Civil Defence Authority, which took control on the 1st of April 1986. Thus, since 1986, the London Fire Brigade has been part of and under the control of the London Fire and Civil Defence Authority. This authority comprises of 1 councillor from each of the 32 London boroughs and a representative of the City of London. Its chief executive is the Chief Officer of the London Fire Brigade. The London Fire Brigade was summoned to the King's Cross Underground Station at 1934, and the first fire appliance arrived at 1942. It will remain a matter of conjecture what would have happened if the London Fire Brigade had been summoned to deal with the burning tissue at the bottom of the Victoria Line escalator, which was extinguished by leading railman Bricknell at about 1915. Their presence then would have enabled them to attack the Piccadilly Line escalator fire at about 12 minutes earlier, and thereby damp down the fire and possibly avoid the build-up that led to the flashover. Similarly, if the brigade had been summoned at 1930 when the fire on escalator 4 was first reported to the station supervisor, they would have been there at least 4 minutes earlier. Because of the risks associated with the fire, the London Fire Brigade had for some time urged London Underground to call them immediately on any suggestion of fire in the Underground. Their concern was so great that on the 23rd of August 1985, the day following the fire at Baker Street, the Chief Fire Officer requested Deputy Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy to write officially to London Underground about the matter. His letter, in brief, read, "I am gravely concerned to find that, contrary to the professional advice of the brigade, a 2-stage procedure has been introduced for notifying the brigade of fires occurring on the London Underground railway system. Following the recent fire at Oxford Circus Underground Station, the brigade made it quite clear that the brigade should be called immediately to any fire on the Underground railway network. Experience has shown that a 2-stage procedure leads to the confusion and, consequently, a delay in attendance to the brigade, as happened at the Baker Street. We are aware that the incidence of fire on the Underground railway network has fallen considerably since the brigade's advice to reduce the amount of litter. Nevertheless, I cannot urge too strongly that the 2-stage procedure be withdrawn and instead clear instructions be given that on any suspicion of fire, the fire brigade be called immediately without delay. This could save lives. In recognition of the difficulties of operating on the railway, we have changed the brigade's procedure to ensure that the attendance of a senior officer whenever the brigade is called to a fire on the underground system. Despite this, neither leading railman Bricknell nor Relief Station Officer Hayes reported the fires which they were investigating, and it was not until Police Constable Bevington's call to the British Transport Police Headquarters logged at 1933 and transmitted to the London Fire Brigade Wembley Control Room at 1934 that the Fire Brigade was alerted. Control Officer French then transmitted the message, was dispatched 5 appliances to King's Cross in accordance with the predetermined attendance. The PDA plan included a requirement that London Fire Brigade should inform the London Underground HQ Control that fire appliances had been sent to King's Cross. The PDA for the fire at King's Cross Underground Station was for 4 pump appliances and a turntable ladder, together with a forward control unit equipped with a special thermal imaging camera equipment. That requirement had been laid down in 1979 and amended in 1984 following the Oxford Circus Station fire. The plan also required the attendance of a senior officer at any fire call on the Underground Railway system. As King's Cross was within the fireground territory of Euston Fire Station, any call from King's Cross would normally be dealt with by Euston. But, unhappily, the Euston appliances were out on another call, so the control officer dispatched appliances from Soho, Clerkenwell fire stations, together with a pump from Manchester Square. Vehicles are required to notify their arrival to headquarters by radio. Considering the traffic conditions, each of the appliances arrived as quickly as they could. On arrival, Station Officer Townsley should have been met by a member of London Underground staff to brief him. Such a guide is highly desirable if the London Fire Brigade is to act effectively and with speed. Unfortunately, no one from the London Underground undertook this task. Police Constable Dixon, who had been asked to meet the Fire Brigade, did not succeed because the London Fire Brigade did not go to the place he anticipated. There was no agreed rendezvous point. Station Officer Townsley, as the officer in charge, entered the station via the Pancras Road entrance, accompanied by members of his crew. By this time, the evacuation had already been started by a member of the British Transport Police. Station Officer Townsley and Temporary Station Officer Bell went to make the reconnaissance and, standing between escalators 5 and 6 at the head of the Piccadilly line escalators, could see a fire burning about halfway down the escalator. Together with Temporary Sub-Officer Bell, Station Officer Townsley went down the escalator a short distance to make a more detailed inspection. He then returned to the Tube Line ticket hall, where he ordered Station Officer Osborne to arrange for 2 breathing apparatus whereas with a water jet. He also instructed temporary leading fireman Flanagan to send a message to the fire control, make pumps 4, as we heard in the earlier timeline. Situated in the Tube Line ticket hall but hidden behind the contractor's temporary boarding was a London Underground fire hydrant with a quantity of canvas hose. In spite of the London Fire Brigade's preference to use their own equipment, this hydrant could have been used to provide a source of water for the fire more quickly than by using a supply from the fire appliances 160 metres away. In 1945, with 2 minutes to the arrival in the Tube Line ticket hall of the crew, from the first London Fire Brigade appliance, the flashover occurred. As a result, the top of the escalators, the Tube Line ticket hall, and the surrounding passages were engulfed in a severe fire with thick black smoke, which forced the fire crews, the police officers, London Underground staff, and the passengers to retreat rapidly in various directions. Some escaped, and some suffered horrific burns, but the fire claimed the lives of 31 people, including Station Officer Townsley. The body of this officer was found at the foot of the steps leading up to the Pancras Road entrance to the station. His uniform and body were virtually unburnt, and lying close beside him was the badly burned body of a passenger. In all likelihood, this was a passenger called Miss Byers, whom he had been trying to help to safety. Some witnesses recounted seeing the fireman wearing a white helmet moving across the concourse just before the flashover, and someone with a torch shouting for passengers to get out. Evidence heard during the investigation was that Station Officer Townsley was trying to help badly burned passengers to safety when he was overcome by smoke and fumes. The flashover divided the underground into 2 worlds, each believing it had lost touch with another. Those on the surface believed that those beneath were trapped or obviously dead. Those beneath had no idea of what was happening above. Their sense of detachment was complete. When he reached the bottom of the Piccadilly line escalators, Temporary Sub-Officer Bell set about stopping people ascending and began to clear them away from the concourse. He shouted to the passengers to get back on the train. Before he began clearing people from the concourse onto the trains, Temporary Sub-Officer Bell had observed that the fire on the escalator appeared to be limited, but when he returned he found that it was totally different, and that the flame was going from the steps and the sides of the escalator, up around the ceiling and back down onto the other escalators. It was curling up the walls of the escalator shaft, right through its crest. Temporary Sub-Officer Bell thereafter set about trying to find a branch nozzle and hose with which to fight the fire. He was unaware of what was happening in the Tube Line's ticket hall, or in the Victoria Line escalator concourse. He did not know that his colleagues on the surface believed he was dead. At the time of the flashover, Station Officer Osborne was in the Tube Line ticket hall at the head of Victoria Line escalator shaft. He saw a very severe fire shooting from the direction of the Piccadilly Line escalators, which looked like a flamethrower. By good fortune, it did not strike him as it burst up into the ticket hall. He shouted to the passengers on the Victoria Line escalator to go back down. Near the top of the Victoria Line escalator, he saw a badly burnt man emerging from the smoke. Station Officer Osborne took this gentleman to the bottom of the Victoria Line escalator and there used a water extinguisher upon him to put out his burning clothes. and relieve his pain. Shortly afterwards, Police Constable Martland and PC took control of the situation and evacuated the gentleman. Meanwhile, Temporary Sub-Officer Bell had begun to lay out fire equipment. He himself was poorly equipped because he had failed to bring his axe, his Bardic torch and his personal radio. He had not fought the fire earlier, partly because he believed it would be attacked by the crews with breathing apparatus from the tube, and partly because he believed to fight the fire from below would endanger those above. To fight the fire, Temporary Sub-Officer Bell climbed the escalator with a police constable and directed the jet into the flames. 3 times they attacked the fire. He tore panels away from the escalator to better attack the fire, but having knocked it out on the surface, Temporary Sub-Officer Bell saw that the fire took hold again and that he had to attack once more. On the surface, fire crews found themselves in a difficult position. The officers in charge of 3 of the appliances, namely Station Officer Townsley, Station Officer Osborne, and Temporary Sub-Officer Bell, could not initially be found. Badly injured and panic-stricken passengers were escaping from the smoke and heat in the ticket hall and entrance tunnels. Meanwhile, firemen Moulton, Button, and Flanagan showed initiative and made determined efforts to enter the tube line ticket hall in breathing apparatus. The heat was so great that at first they were driven back until fireman Moulton entered again, with firemen Edgar and Button using their hoe lines to spray his back and thereby keep the temperature bearable for brief periods. It was about this time that the body of Station Officer Townsley was recovered at the foot of the steps leading to the Pancras Road entrance. In 1949, 4 minutes after the flashover, Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw of Euston Fire Station arrived by car. Having been mobilised as part of the predetermined attendance, there was no officer in charge to brief him, and those left on the service were dealing with the immediate aftermath of the flashover. Neither was there any member of London Underground staff to guide him as the geography of the station. Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw immediately requested additional pumps and 4 ambulances to attend. Almost at once, he was told that 3 fire officers were missing and had not reported back after going into the underground. Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw then requested further fire pumps, making 12 in all, knowing that this would be a command in attendance for a more senior officer. Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw was based at Euston. Accordingly, King's Cross was part of his fireground territory. He knew of the Midland City entrance and that the tunnel from Pentonville Road ended up somewhere in King's Cross Station. What he did not know is precisely where. It is a matter of great regret that Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw should not have appreciated the importance of the Midland City entrance, particularly given that he remarked upon the absence of smoke there. Furthermore, he failed to brief his superior officers about the entrance when he handed over. It is equally to be noted that they did not inquire about the position of any entrances from the rear of the site which might be relevant to the purposes of rescue. Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw nevertheless did well to mobilise further reinforcements during the time that he was in charge. Divisional Officer Johnson arrived at 2012 and immediately assumed command, but he remained in charge for no more than 3 minutes before Deputy Assistant Chief Officer Woolston arrived at 2015. Deputy Assistant Chief Officer Wilson was in command for 26 minutes, during which time he requested an increase of fire pumps to 20, coordinated the work of various control units and sought plans of the underground. Station Officer Dumont delivered the fire station plans at about 2053. Before that, the London Fire Brigade had to resort to enlisting the help of a British rail manager who drew from them a plan of the area. Although London Underground failed to provide assistance to the London Fire Brigade about the layout of the underground, it is equally true that the London Fire Brigade failed to seek assistance as they might have done, for example, through the London Fire Underground Control, who could have been reached via the London Fire Brigade Wembley control room. In the absence of help from London Underground, it had proved very difficult to understand the geography of the underground station. There were 2 sets of plans held in boxes in the tube line ticket hall, but one was concealed behind a temporary hoarding and the other was in a perimeter subway too far from the exit to the street to be reached through the dense smoke. In spite of the difficulties under the London Fire Brigade commanders were working, it is a matter of surprise that no attempt was made to survey the possibilities of entering and approaching the underground station from an alternative rear entrance as laid down in Book 2, Part 3 of the Manual of Firemanship. Deputy Assistant Chief Officer Woolston defended his decision not to adopt this strategic approach by saying that he had insufficient officers to detach to make a reconnaissance through an alternative entrance or an approach by the train. Bearing in mind the difficulties which accompanied entry from the front, it is the belief of the investigating officer that Deputy Chief Assistant Wilson should have made a strategic appraisal of the position which attempted an earlier reconnaissance of the possibility of an alternative entrance. If he had insufficient men, it would have been a simple matter for him to increase the number of pumps required to attend. At 2041, Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy arrived and, as he took over command from Deputy Chief Officer Wilson, he realised that the firefighters were working under arduous conditions and that some were suffering from the effects of heat and stress. He therefore requested the attendance of 10 more pumps, making a total of 30 altogether. During this period of command, search crews led by Assistant Divisional Officer Shaw reached the Victoria Line escalator concourse and met Station Officer Osborne by the way of the tube line ticket hall. Other crews reached Temporary Sub-Officer Bell and the Station Officer Osborne by the way the Midland City entrance. About 21:40, leading railwoman Ord and railwayman Swaby were discovered in the staff mess room of the subway and released by firefighters. At 21:48, Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy was able to send the aforementioned fire surround message indicating that the fire was under control. From about 2015, the liaison between the fire, police and ambulance and London Fire Brigade staff on the surface had begun to be established. However, Assistant Chief Officer Kennedy did not make full use of the opportunities for liaison between these agencies presented by the arrival of the Metropolitan Police Inspector Coleman and London Underground Officer Incident Officer Green. No doubt liaison was not assisted by the late arrival of a number of incident or control vehicles, but the investigating officer was left with the clear impression that opportunities to pass vital information between the services were missed. Moreover, there was complete ignorance upstairs on the surface of what was taking place downstairs at the bottom of the Piccadilly line escalators or on the platforms themselves. Following the investigation, there were a number of lessons to be learned by London Fire Brigade. Number 1. Had Temporary Sub-Officer Bell and Station Officer Osborne taken with them their personal radios, communications between them and those at the top of the escalator might have remained open. Number 2. Although the occupier of property should invariably provide a guide to meet the fire brigade on arrival, where such a guide is not provided and the fire brigade have no detailed knowledge of the geography, it is their duty to obtain details forthwith. It is a matter of grave concern that on the night of the disaster at King's Cross, the London Fire Brigade did not seek out an official of London Underground to obtain details of the complicated layout of the underground stations. And number 3, the court was left with the impression that there had been a breakdown of communications at command level between the emergency services. Each diligently pursued its own duty, but there was a lack of communication and liaison between them. It is noted at several points during the investigations that we have gone through for this incident that a large number of the members of London Fire Brigade behaved with conspicuous courage and devotion to their duty during the disaster in which they lost a very brave officer, Station Officer Townsley. In summary, the King's Cross fire claimed the lives of 31 people, including a senior ranked firefighter, and seriously injured many more at King's Cross Station. A public inquiry by Sir Desmond Fennell, published in November 1988, made 157 recommendations. These included replacing wooden escalators, the smoking ban extended to all station areas, radio equipment used by British Transport Police to be compatible with those of the Fire Brigade, a review of the Fire Brigade's personal protective equipment, improvements to the Brigade's radio communication between firefighters below ground, plans of stations to be kept outside the stations in locations agreed by the Fire Brigade, and a review of training and policy. Among those caught in the fireball was Soho Station Officer Colin Townsley, who had entered the underground with a colleague, Temporary Sub-Officer Roger Bell of Clerkenwell Fire Station, to assess the situation. As covered in the debrief earlier, crews found the body of Station Officer Townsley beside the badly burned body of a passenger. Station Officer Townsley was overcome by smoke and fumes while trying to help burn passengers. At Soho Fire Station, Station Officer Colin Townsley's space remains empty in memory of the fallen firefighter and the member of the public who lost their lives on that terrible day. This tragic fire has redefined policy on public transport and led to the changes that keep everyone safer today. This ends the debrief into the King's Cross fire from 18th of November 1987. The podcast is passionate about sharing lessons learned from many debriefs across the world. If you have documentation, information relating to, or links to any debriefs you'd like shared on the podcast, please send them into the Firefighters Podcast at gmail.com. Our sincere hope is that as we recall, learn from, and also acknowledge the actions of those who have gone before us, and keep frontline responders and firefighters safer as they carry out their heroic acts on the front line every single day. Thanks for coming back to the podcast. We'll see you next time.
The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.